Avatar: The Last Airbender was pretty much perfect, but these are the 3 worst episodes. The third one being The Swamp, with a rating of 7.5. The episode starts off with Zuko and Iroh begging for some money. I have no idea what the point of this scene was, because it's not important to the plot of the episode, but we get this funny scene and this dope song and dance from Iroh. Also, I love that this guy's being a total jerk, and Iroh is just like,
"What a kind gentleman."
Next, we see Aang and his friends flying over this creepy looking swamp. And of course, Aang feels like the swamp is calling to him, so he suggests they go in. Everyone decides that's a terrible idea, and they start flying away. But then a huge storm comes out of nowhere, which makes Appa crash. Also, it looks like the storm literally chases Appa when he goes the other direction, so I'm not sure if this really was a storm. The gang all lands safely, besides for a gigantic leech on Sokka's arm. There's only one problem though. Aang has no idea where Appa and Momo are, which is pretty scary. Remember that one time Aang lost Appa? Dude was going crazy. And turns out Appa and Momo are about to get into a lot of trouble, but we'll see more about that later. Aang warns Sokka that he shouldn't hurt the swamp because something about it feels alive. Yeah, that's not terrifying at all. Sokka, of course, though, doesn't care and just continues to cut everything with his machete. They spend all day looking for Appa and Momo, but don't have any luck. It starts getting dark quickly too, so the gang sets up camp for the night. Aang and his friends are all out. They're sleeping hard until something crazy happens. The vines wrap around them and straight up drag them all into the fog, and the gang gets separated while fighting off these crazy vines. Next, we see some interesting looking swamp people named Tho and Do. They find Appa's huge footprints and they decide they want to eat him, so they follow the footprints. Appa and Momo are having their own little adventure, and Momo is riding Appa like a boat. Tell me how Momo almost gets eaten by a catfish alligator until Appa steps in like the good big brother he is. Anyways, this is when things in the swamp get really weird. Katara is wandering through the swamp and straight up sees a hallucination of her mom, causing her to break down into tears. Sokka also sees his ex-girlfriend turn into a literal moon, by the way, but Aang's hallucination is a lot different than Sokka and Katara's. Probably because he's the Avatar. He sees some strange little girl running through the trees and tries to catch her. Appa and Momo are still chilling in the river until they run into the swamp people, who make a terrible first impression.
Nothing to worry about, just fixing to eat you.
Which makes Appa do an instant 180 and swim away. This is when we see that the swamp people can also waterbend. So they waterbend the boats and chase Appa. Aang keeps chasing this little girl, but he ends up running into Katara and Sokka instead. Also, it's pretty cool that the little girl Aang was chasing is actually his future earthbender teacher, Toph. So the swamp is not only full of hillbillies, but plot spoilers too. Each of their visions led them to the heart of the swamp. A gigantic swamp monster pops up and starts throwing Sokka around. Katara and Aang hit this crazy combo and wear down the monster, but they soon realize it's not a monster, but just some dude bending the vines. So it turns out, this man is just trying to protect the swamp from the people that hurt it, like Sokka with his fat knife. He also reveals that the entire swamp is connected to one tree, and he uses it to say that the entire world is connected. And that's why the swamp shows you visions. So then Aang does some Avatar plot armor stuff and somehow sees exactly where Appa is by touching the tree. And Aang meets up with the swamp people, saves his bison, and they all have a cute little meal together. Also, Sokka is still convinced nothing strange is happening in the swamp, even after the weird visions and being grabbed by vines in the middle of the night. And also, nobody can explain the random storm that made them crash. And then the episode finally ends with Zuko beating up that guy who was being a jerk in the beginning. I can kind of see why this episode is rated a lot lower than the rest of the show. Besides the foreshadowing for Toph and introducing the swamp benders, this episode really contributed nothing to the main plot of the series. It was kind of a filler episode. This episode also had really bad pacing and feels kind of slow compared to the other episodes of the show. Besides that though, this is Avatar. So the episode was pretty enjoyable to watch and had a pretty creepy atmosphere, and 7 stars really isn't that bad, but it's definitely not the best writing in the show. The second worst episode is Avatar Day, with a rating of 7.5. The episode starts off with the gang being woken up by some firebenders riding on rhinos, who have them completely surrounded. They have to leave, but all their stuff is still on the ground. Katara and Aang manage to get some of their stuff, but Sokka has to leave behind his boomerang, which is pretty sad. This is like his most favorite thing in the world. So they go to this shop and the guy says,
"Happy Avatar Day."
But Aang has no idea what that is. They go to this local town and things aren't what they seem. Turns out the holiday isn't for celebrating the Avatar, but instead, it's literally a holiday for hating on the Avatar. Which, not to bash on Aang, but he's kind of cocky, so this is not going to be good. But apparently one of the past avatars, Avatar Kyoshi, killed their old leader, which is why they hate the Avatar. Aang is obviously so upset that they think that he's a murderer, but he decides to stand trial for the crime to prove he is innocent. But instead he just ends up in jail since they can't pay bail. So Sokka decides to become the detective for Aang's case and wears his really ugly detective hat. So Sokka snoops around, but he can't find any evidence, except for a small footprint the village claims belongs to Kyoshi, Sokka and Katara go all the way to Kyoshi Island and investigate there, until he sees that Kyoshi's shoes were way too big to have left the footprint at the temple. Not only does he find this, but also finds an alibi for Kyoshi the night of the murder. Aang also rants about his girl problems to the prisoners, who seem pretty cool. I mean, Aang literally looks just like him, since he's bald with tattoos. Although Sokka built a pretty strong case for Aang, the justice system in the town is extremely rigged.
That's why we call it justice, because it's just us.
When it's time for Aang's trial, he completely messes up his defense. I have very large feet. Anyways, Katara has one desperate attempt to save Aang, calling Kyoshi as a witness. But it's just Aang in Kyoshi's clothes.
Hey everybody, Avatar Kyoshi here.
Kyoshi eventually does come out, except she literally confesses to the crime. Chin the Conqueror was trying to take over Kyoshi's village, which is why she stopped him and created Kyoshi Island. This dude Chin could have just stepped back, but instead he stands right by the cliff and falls off. What an idiot. So Aang is found guilty for the murder of Chin, and they bring out the Wheel of Punishment. And his punishment is being boiled in oil. This town is extremely brutal. But then, boom, a giant explosion happens, and the firebenders from the start of the episode show up to claim the town. The leader of the town changes Aang's sentence to community service and asks them to save their town. After everything, literally about to kill him, and now they're asking him to save the town. Aang, Katara, and Sokka fight off the invaders and successfully drive them away. So now the town has forgiven Aang, and they create a new Avatar Day in his honor. So this episode was alright. While most Avatar episodes balance humor and drama pretty well, this one just kind of falls short, and the episode feels a lot more like a joke episode than something serious. The plot of the episode is also just weak. This episode would have felt better if they spent more time showing Kyoshi's backstory and less time on Sokka's detective jokes. It's easy to see why this episode is one of the weaker ones of the series and leaves a lot to be desired. It's definitely a filler episode. And now, the worst Avatar episode of all time with a rating of 6.8 stars is The Great Divide. The episode starts off with the gang camping near a giant canyon. Sokka and Katara are arguing about whether or not they should put up a tarp until Aang is able to solve their problems for them. Then they run into two tribes known as the Ganjin and Jangs. The two groups clearly don't get along due to some long history, but they both need to cross through the canyon to get to Ba Sing Se, and there's only one earthbending tour guide that can bring them. And Aang somehow convinces the tribes to travel together, even though they hate each other. But there's only one rule: no food in the canyon, because it can apparently attract some dangerous predators. So anyways, things are going pretty well in the canyon until this gigantic bug monster thing shows up and bodies the tour guide. The canyon crawler broke both of the tour guide's arms, and without his bending, they're all trapped in the canyon. The two tribes just sit there arguing. So Aang, with his avatar wisdom, decides the best way to travel is to separate the tribes. And he also splits up Katara and Sokka to find out why these tribes hate each other so much. So both of the tribes set up camp, but here's the thing. Both of the tribes ended up smuggling food in, and they're all just munching. And I kind of feel bad for Aang and the guide, because these two are the only ones who haven't ate food. Both of the tribes have a different story of what happened to make them hate each other, so no one knows what really happened. The Gajings believe the Zhangs stole their sacred orb, and the Zhangs believe that the Ganjings wrongly imprisoned them after they tried to return their orb. The next day, they finally make it to the end of the canyon. They just need to find a way up. And of course, these guys just keep arguing, and even Katara and Sokka pick sides, so they're arguing too. Aang tries telling them that the words will solve nothing, and they should take action, but this just makes them start fighting. So Aang's obviously just had enough, so he blasts everyone away with a big gust of air. And after Aang knocks them all back, he sees all the food they smuggled in, and this makes him start to lose his mind. And things quickly turn to pure chaos, because now that the food's out, it attracts a ton of canyon crawlers. At first they struggle to fight against the giant bugs, but Aang gets the genius idea to tie up to the canyon crawler's mouth and ride on its back using the food. So everyone gets one of the bugs and rides out of the canyon, which is honestly the coolest part of the episode. The tribes are finally about to make up because of how well they work together, but they just can't let go of their past. This is where the writing honestly feels kind of lazy, because Aang just straight up lies to them, claiming that he was there 100 years ago, and that their long feud was just based on kids playing with the ball. And that's what makes them forgive each other. The tribes finally accept their differences and look towards the future, and Aang finally gets his custard tart, and the episode ends. This episode wasn't the best. I get the theme of forgiveness, but all the arguing started to feel so repetitive, and the plot was kind of just badly laid out. I hate how you know how episode's gonna end right when you start it, and that's exactly how this episode felt. It was obvious the two tribes were gonna make up by the end of the episode, and it felt really stretched out. And I really don't get the point of this episode. The plot of Avatar usually feels very heavy and thought through, but this episode just feels like a lazy filler episode, and it's widely regarded as one of the worst episodes in the entire series by many fans. I don't know. I'm just watching TV and overthinking and, just watching TV Avatar. That's what I'm watching. I'm gonna watch Avatar, and the worst episode's Avatar. That's literally what I'm